Welcome to the Pathways to Success. I'm Julian Placino, recruiting professional turned success speaker, show host, and media entrepreneur. This show is dedicated to helping you find your unique pathway to success by having conversations that educate, inspire, and transform. Together, we'll interview some of the world's greatest leaders and uncover their secrets to success. Thanks for tuning in, and on to the show. Welcome to episode 198 of the Pathways to Success, where we have conversations that educate, inspire, and transform with the world's greatest leaders. I'm Julian Placino, your host, and we have a tremendous show in store for you today. Today's episode is brought to you by Code Up, the premier career accelerator in Texas. Code Up's web development and data science programs will take you from beginner to job-ready professional in 22 weeks from the comfort of your own home. Code Up's data science program has an 88% employment rate, and their web development program has an astonishing 99% employment rate. Code Up is so confident in their programs that if you don't find a career in field within 6 months of graduating, you'll receive a 100% tuition refund. So if you are ready to start a career in web development or data science, I highly recommend you check out Code Up at codeup.com. That's CODEUP.com. So before we introduce our featured guest today, I got to give a huge shout out to everyone here tuned into the live stream. I see Jen, I see Sherry. If you are watching us on Facebook now, I watched the live stream through YouTube. So head over to YouTube, type in my name, Julian Placino, click the live link, and join us in the chat. I am very excited about our featured guest today, and it is none other than Ben Hubbard, CEO of Nexus PMG. Ben, welcome to the Pathways to Success.
Thanks,
How
glad
are you?
to be here. I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. It's fine. It's kind of nice to have some interactions again. It's been a while.
Exactly, and that's why I feel like it's sort of a long time coming. Every time I've interacted with you, it's been through Zoom.
I know, we were just laughing about how it's, even seeing somebody's face without a mask these days is, just a change of pace. So it's been good. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and a huge shout out to Raj Daniels, who's here in studio with us right now, who has been a previous guest of the Pathways to Success, your Director of Strategic Partnerships.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for making this happen.
Thanks, Raj.
So Ben, I want to jump right into things and create some context for the conversation. So if you would, tell us, what is Nexus PMG?
Absolutely. So Nexus PMG is a leading advisory and development company for low carbon infrastructure. So essentially we are a business that is specialty focused on reducing the carbon intensity and enhancing resource efficiency in what we call process-based infrastructure. So not thinking bridges and roads and tollways, but more like power plants, refining practices, carbon capture, hydrogen production, some of these kind of emerging fields that are really there to kind of reduce our dependency on fossil fuels, and we specialize that. So we advise dozens and dozens of the world's largest infrastructure funds and private equity firms, and then we also design and develop a lot of these assets to own and operate long term as well.
So you do it yourselves, and also you mentioned there was an investment piece. You advise funds that...
Correct. Yeah. So the other, recently in January, I believe it was, we launched a $20 million development capital vehicle. So now we're actually kind of quote unquote putting our money where our mouth is, if you will. Yeah. And so we're deploying loans into the sector as well to kind of fill a niche in the capital markets part where the large-scale money from the big infrastructure funds and hedge funds is there, but the early-stage money to kind of get, it's the equivalent of kind of venture in our world, to get developers to the point where they can get $150 million to build their project. We specialize in that part of the capital, and we can de-risk those investments because of our experience at the parent company to essentially, protect the downside with our knowledge, skill sets, and sometimes even services we can provide to those projects to make sure that they move forward properly.
When we first had our pre-interview conversation and you were walking me through some of the projects that you've done, I felt you literally are changing the world with the kind of stuff that you're doing. So what are some of the most impressive, results or examples that you could showcase as kind of results that Nexus PMG has created?
Yeah, I'll give you an example of a project or a company we're partnering with and projects we're working on right now that is probably really fascinating for some people. So, one of the areas in that is a high focus of the climate change kind of endeavor, if you will, to try to decarbonize is actually agriculture, right? Very commonly we go to think about wind and solar and kind of power generation, but agriculture is a big part of the narrative, right? So what we're doing is we're working with a business. They're actually Dallas-based, backed originally by Mark Cuban on Shark Tank, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
They transformed their business over the years to be less consumer products facing and more industrial. And we are essentially partnering with them to design and develop projects that take different types of waste streams and create something called black soldier fly larvae. And what that is it's a really, really highly dense protein bug that then gets used for animal feed. So you don't have to use nasty corn stover and grains and things that normally fatten up and get fed. These are really natural, organic, high protein, high insects that are actually being birthed from somebody else's waste stream. So you're reducing the dependency of that waste going to a landfill while simultaneously creating that circular economy infrastructure to create a byproduct that is actually used for animal feed and sold to Cargill and Tyson Foods and some of the big food processors. And so we build these facilities and we're scaling that business with them. And so, that's just a really niche industry that is growing and is projected to be a multi-billion-dollar industry in the coming years.
What was the genesis story of Nexus PMG? Like, how did this company come into existence?
Yeah, so we were talking here earlier that, I come from a long-standing engineering construction background. So I graduated with a mechanical engineering degree. I went into a large engineering construction company, also headquartered here in Dallas, called Fluor.
Fluor,
if you're familiar with them. Yeah, so I worked for Fluor for 12, 13 years. A lot of my colleagues and co-founders similar. And so kind of went through the ranks and rose up, did a lot of international assignments in Saudi Arabia, lived in a tent in Mongolia, lots of, whatever it took to kind of get ahead in that world, and doing those assignments will help you that way. And so basically in 2013, we were sitting in Saudi Arabia, my co-founders and I, And we're thinking to ourselves, A, we've got to get out of Saudi Arabia because we've been here for 3 years and it's time to get out of the desert and do something different. And B, what we realized was at that time was the way that infrastructure projects of that magnitude, we're talking multi-billion-dollar projects, were being assessed from a risk management perspective was just not being done the way that we thought it could be done better. So we left, formed Nexus PMG. It was birthed as an advisory firm to look and assess risk before financing goes into these projects to try to capture, articulate, and quantify that risk a little bit differently. So we built our own software systems, we built our own infrastructure to allow us to do that. And look, I'll be honest, I mean, when you're 27 years old and you go knock on the door of a hedge fund and say, hey, hire me as a consultant, literally on my first pitch, they looked at me and said, you see those work boots in the corner, they have more experience than all three of you combined. So it was an uphill battle, but we chipped away at it and we got a couple to agree to give us a shot at it. And one client becomes two becomes four. And before we knew it, we became known as the guys that do the funky projects, the wood pellet production facilities, the black soldier fly larvae facilities, hydrogen production, whatever, these kind of things that were, at that time, were kind of 1 out of 10 projects. Today, it's 9 out of 10 projects because the world has changed so much when it comes to reducing our carbon footprint. I mean, you see it every day, right? Just announcements from corporates to try to decarbonize. And so we got ahead. And today we're happy to say that, where our competitors have done 1 or 2 projects in these verticals, we've done 50 or 75. And so we just have so much experience and market knowledge now that we like to think we're one of the go-to, if not the go-to firm for these types of projects, which are now dominating the industry.
I'm fascinated with all stories of entrepreneurship. And I think I would like to find out, what was that first customer acquisition story? What do you think your keys were to getting that first client?
Well, if I'm being reflective and very honest, part of it was relationships, right? Okay. I mean, I don't think there's a person in this world that would lie and say that, having somebody open a door for you is just part of business development, right? You have to have some good relationships. You have to give to get, but you definitely got to be able to open some doors. So I was fortunate where some of my family, some of my friends, some former colleagues were able to open some doors for us. Once we got in the door, right, it was all about driving the value proposition. We knew our weaknesses. We knew we were young, and consultants aren't typically young, right? Especially we're talking about multi-billion-dollar infrastructure. Sure. People want 30, 40-year construction manager guys who've been in the field for their whole careers. They're the ones who've seen everything, right? So we knew that was a weakness. We knew we had to play on our strengths. At that time was technology, risk assessment through different software systems that were new in the market. So we played up heavily on kind of the technology influence of what we were capable of doing and showing those deliverables and results. Like, look, we can quantify risk and look what we can provide you. And some of our prospective clients started looking at us and saying, that's really different than just a person who's done it for 30 years articulating to me what the risk profile looks like. You're actually physically quantifying it with mathematical models and things. So we played to our strengths, which was kind of these statistical models and some of the new age software. And back in 2013, right, I mean, it was your software, and even today, technology is growing so fast that you can be a market mover if you adopt it. So we kind of integrated those two parts. And like I said, once we got a little bit of rhythm, people see it, hey, this is actually really solid. We need to use you on all of our engagements. And lo and behold, we got to where we are today on that side.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ben, before we take our commercial break, tell us, what do you think is the future of Nexus PMG?
So it's funny you say that. We were just having our board meeting early this morning, defining our future.
Good timing.
Yeah, it's great timing. So, I think we continue to expand our business to predominantly transition from a heavy service providing company to an asset developer and financing and investment company. So we'll slowly but surely get hired less by third parties to provide services, to investing our own capital and capital that we raise into essentially developing, constructing, and owning these assets for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And I think that's the future, is if I could picture what 2030 looks like, or even 2025, it's Nexus PMG is a large asset owner of low carbon infrastructure.
I love that.
Yeah.
So Ben, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we return, Ben's keys to success when we come back.
You want to transition out of your career and do something tech related. CodeUp is the place for you. When I came to CodeUp, I was actually working at a chain hair salon. It was just starting not to be for me anymore. My goals were to never work a weekend ever again, to have full health care and benefits, and to just have more time with my son. And now I've met all of those goals. I don't have any regrets. I just regret not coming sooner when I saw those billboards and I was driving down the highway.
And we're back with Ben Hubbard, CEO of Nexus PMG, and his keys to success. So Ben, just like as we mentioned just a second ago, I have a small gift for you,
All right.
courtesy of our friends at Dead Soxy. Thank you, Jason Simmons, for supporting the show. So you, Ben, actually are the first to get a limited edition.
Oh, yeah.
Pathways
Look
to
at that.
Success designer sock.
And apparently
from
I
Dead
need socks.
Soxy.
So
yeah.
that's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I love them.
These are fantastic.
Yeah, you know, honestly, of the things that I've done, like in the media space, when I saw my logo on a sock, I was like,
That's
dude,
that's
I made
unique.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that is really unique. Not gonna
So
lie.
thank you, Jason Simmons, and thank you, Dead Soxy, for supporting the show.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, Ben, something you're very passionate about speaking on is this idea of empathy-driven leadership. Help us out first with a definition. What is empathy-driven leadership?
Yeah, it's leadership, and that doesn't necessarily mean the way you lead your own team. It's the way you lead your company, yourself, your family, everything. But just generally speaking, empathy-driven leadership is actually have a passion for caring in the causes and the just cause of whatever it is that you're doing. Right? It doesn't matter what that is, but actually being motivated and driven and making decisions based off of empathizing for whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, right? And that can be the people that work for you, that can be your clients, that can be the planet, right? In our case, is a big part of it.
Yep.
So actually leading with that first and making that one of if not the most important characteristic to kind of your core values of your business and your personal endeavors.
How would you sort of contrast this to different leadership styles that you see within the marketplace?
Yeah, I mean, we work with we have a lot of clients, and I worked for Fortune 500 companies prior to starting Nexus, so I got a nice wide range of understanding the different types of leadership styles, right? And you get a lot of, I'll call it the more bottom line leadership, right? And you see that a lot in publicly traded companies, like whatever it takes, and unfortunately, sometimes employees become, a statistic or a number, right? And it's just the reality in some cases. We see a lot of leadership characteristics that for a lot of our clients and businesses that are more heavy focused on, not so much on the interactions of the teams, but more about as long as the team is meeting its corporate goals or objectives, but doesn't matter necessarily if that team likes working with each other and they have a camaraderie, they go out to dinners because they enjoy each other's company. It's just kind of, and so you see these different kind of verticals. I'm a big fan, and Raj and I were talking, and I did a book club review on Simon Sinek's, leadership style, which is more a just cause, work with each other. Yeah, so kind of buy and subscribe into that a little bit more. So for Nexus and for me and my management team, it's really actually caring about our people, and I mean that genuinely. So, we spend time understanding what motivates each one of our people from a business and personal perspective. We make sure we have things like we do things such as like we do a monthly book club at Raj hosts, and we actually let our employees come in and actually pick the topics, come in and actually talk about things you want. Let's get away from the nuances of our work every 5 minutes. We do regular lunches and dinners where we just don't talk about work stuff and actually do it. We do birthday gifts for every single employee in our entire company, and they're customized to that person. So not just an Amazon gift card all the time, right? Been a little trickier during COVID, but generally speaking, actually caring about that. We do an employee spotlight every single week and every single month. We just care about our people. We truly care about them, and we let that be the driving force, because we feel like if people want to work for Nexus and for us, then everything else will fall into place. Performance and all the other things that come with having a good leadership and employee base.
Yeah, I'm curious, when you think about empathy-driven leadership, I think sometimes some people might think that's sort of foo-foo, but if you were to articulate the clear benefits that Nexus PMG has experienced as a result of this leadership style, what would you say they are?
Yeah, I mean, the feedback we get from a lot of our team is quote things like, "I'm in this for the long haul." Like, I'm never going. Like, people just, the turnover's low. People want to stay with the business. We get a lot of great feedback from our team that they've never been happier working for Nexus PMG. And that's not to say it's not every last person's going to feel that way, but generally speaking, we get a lot of great favorable reaction from our employee base that say, and even in the public forum on LinkedIn and places where people will share our social media and say, "I've never been happier working for a company. If you're ever going to work for a company, you should find one that's like Nexus." So the feedback from our people is just, and it makes us feel great, right? It's tremendous, because I'd sacrifice profit all day long to be able to have an employee base and a team that is like truly enjoying their lives and happy with what they're doing.
Yeah. And how many employees do you have now?
I think we have about roughly 50. I think we're like 50 employees. We have a lot of contractors as well, so we're probably close to between 50 and 75 full-time. It fluctuates, and then we probably have access to about 100 that like are subject matter experts that will come in for various niche market engagements for 8 weeks or 6 weeks on these advisories. So it kind of scales up and down accordingly.
So I'm curious, when it comes to hiring for Nexus PMG, how do you go about screening for empathy-driven leaders? What does that look like?
It's hard. Our interview process is probably a little bit funkier than most. We're not necessarily always just looking at the skills, because it requires you not to just look at their physical skill set.
Sure.
And you do this job, right? You're looking at personality. How do you interact? What type of person are you? What motivates you? What drives you, right? So I think we catch a lot of people off guard with our questions right around, and trying to get a read on the type of person that they are. And that is just as important to us as the skill set itself. We feel like as a company, we can put, it's not uncommon to be able to mold and train people to have a skill set, right? But you can't change somebody's personality and you can't change somebody's motivations. They generally, more often than not, are who they are and enjoy and are passionate about what they're passionate about. So we spend a lot of time on culture. We do our own media production around the culture. So a lot of it is trying to make sure that the top of the funnel that's coming in applying for the jobs already are doing it because they know that's how you lead, right? So it makes it a little bit easier because your candidates that are coming in are already more tailored to your leadership style. And then it's a lot of instinct and just kind of natural feel and understanding of kind of how the conversation goes, asking them about what matters to them, asking them personal questions. Do you have children? How do you, have you moved a lot in your life? And just not as always about have you done schedule-driven analysis in this software, right? And I think when you have a conversation and treat these interviews like you're talking to a real person and you're not talking to a future employee, you're talking to a potential colleague and friend, you get a different kind of opening up and a different dialogue that you can really start to get to know someone and see if they're a good fit.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with this process because my background is talent acquisition for 12 years. I've seen so many different kinds of hiring processes, and it really does feel like sometimes a crapshoot if you don't have a defined interviewing process. So I'm curious, is there something unique about the way that you do your interviews that allows you to find a high degree of certainty somebody who has empathy-driven leadership ability? So
we have a multi-round interview process. So our people we don't have just one person, right? So they typically at least interview with 3, sometimes all 5 owners of the business. And the 5 owners of the business all have their own characteristics and are looking for certain things, right? And then we aggregate those thoughts together. One thing that's really important for us is like a diversity of experience and interest. Where I always say to a lot of people, I'm not looking for people who have 30 years of experience, but it's really 1 year of experience 30 times. We like people that have really unique backgrounds. We just hired an executive leadership, a woman who has a chemical engineering degree, spent 10 years as a chemical engineer, process engineer. Then she went 5 years into like bank finance. Then she spent 2 years in a completely different ag industry. And so this diversity is something that is a character interest to us, right? Because people who are willing to make those changes and can be a chameleon, right, typically have a characteristic and a personality trait that follows that ability to do that. So we look at things like, we look at those channels. Where have you worked? Have you always done the same thing? Or were you able to branch out into totally different industries? And look at some of those things in their past experience. And it usually is a really good insight for us. And then when we do those interviews, we can really grab, why did you do that? Why did you go from being a chemical engineer to a finance? What motivated you to do that? And you start learning again about the person themselves and how they think and what motivates them and the type, are they entrepreneurial in spirit? We find a very definitive relationship between an entrepreneurial spirit and empathy-driven leaders, because people who are entrepreneurial tend to they need people to want to work for them to be successful, right? And so if you have that entrepreneurial spirit, which we look for, you typically will find more of an empathy-driven mindset. Not always, but more often than not.
Have you seen any commonalities or at least very strong indicators that somebody will have empathy-driven leadership ability?
I would say that would be the one I just mentioned would be one of them. The ability to have a diverse background and being okay and comfortable in uncomfortable situations,
Yeah.
right? The unconventional, moving from being an engineer to a finance person, or a finance person to a analyst in something completely different, industry changes, right? Things like that. We also see it, I should say, quite regularly when we're interviewing people that have very family-centric values, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not very many people who don't love their children immensely,
Sure.
and so if you see a lot, I hope you see a lot of people, right? So good family values is a big indication.
Cool.
And then the other thing is it's not just empathy downward, it's empathy upwards too, right? We as managers of the company and as leaders of the company, we're humans too, right? I still go home and have my stresses and have my challenges in life. So getting any indication, if you can, that, have you ever done anything for your boss, right? The other way. It's not always, have you done something for the person that works for you, but do you actually feel empathy for the people that you work for? And so there's certain types of questions and certain types of interactions you can get in ideas. It goes both ways, right? And empathy-driven leadership is upwards and downwards.
So in an empathy-driven leadership organization, how have you historically managed a poor performer or somebody who's been struggling within the organization?
Yeah, so the best way in that environment is to leverage the empathy, which in and of itself, right, is actually caring for that person's ability to be a better performer.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that every time you go in there and you have an honest conversation around that performance and show that you really want them to be better, not just because it's delivering bottom line, but you want them, people that aren't good at their job tend to not be very happy, right?
Sure.
You don't see professional athletes that are NBA basketball players that hate playing basketball very often, et cetera, right? So it's a combination of what we usually find is they're not doing a role they're really passionate about, and that's why they're not good at it, is because they're not motivated to be good at it. And so we actually get in there and say, are you really happy even doing this? Do we need to course correct, right? Rather than just fire you because we hired you for this, can we actually have you do something different in the organization that you're really passionate about? We had an employee recently that went from being an analyst of schedule and cost control to doing all of our media production. We found that person really still does that work, but really enjoys producing our video content and stuff and writing blogs and being more social and media. It was a complete change. But having empathy to just go in and not be binary in your thinking and say, that person's not doing a good job at that, be better at that, or you're moving on, is going in and actually leveraging that empathy to actually figure out what's really going on. And ultimately, if you can't, if the person just isn't fitting the role you need, or there isn't a role that fits, that happens. But generally, that's kind of how we look at things and making those changes. And I'm happy to say that we've had very, very low turnover as a result.
Yeah. No, I love that process. I think poor performance is usually a symptom of something underlying, and you caring about what that is for the individual allows you to get closer to what that might be for that individual.
Yeah.
Give us one piece of advice. I have a lot of corporate leaders and CEOs tune into the show. So if there was one step that someone could take to help move their organization into more of an empathy-driven leadership organization, what's that one step?
I would say challenge yourself to ask yourself, do you really know your teams?
Yeah.
Right? It's amazing how many leaders I talk to, the person who works directly for them has no idea what their kids' names are, doesn't know what they do on the weekends, has no idea what really motivates them. Are they church-going people, and you can collaborate over that. Really, truly, to get to know these people. Take them out to lunch, not to determine how you can be better in the business and generate more profits and have better performance. Get to know them. Right? Actually recognize them as a human being who has a life, who has their own stresses, who might have mental health issues because things are crazy these days. Get to know and empathize for who they are, and then figure out how you can make them a better version of themselves. And almost always there's reciprocity there. So I would say just ask yourself that question. Do I really know my team as people?
I love that, and I think that is great advice.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So, Ben, something I know you're passionate about speaking on also is this idea of the relentless pursuit of education.
Yeah.
I think that can easily be dismissed as a platitude, but how did it first come to your realization of its utility?
Yeah, I think it's just inherent in who I am personally. I hate not knowing how things work.
Sure.
right? I often see two different categories of people. If you don't know something, the first thing a lot of people do is ask somebody who does. Hey, what does that mean? I'm the guy who gets on Google and has to like figure it out myself,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Like it's just, I can't stand it, right? But what I find often a lot of times is that, especially in Western culture, what we find is education has a stopping point. It's like I go to high school, and if you don't go to college, like I'm done learning, right? I did my learning, now I go make money off of my learnings in a career, or vice versa. You finish college or a master's degree, and that's it. It's a binary thought process in our Western culture in particular. Whereas the reality is we should never stop learning, right? It's not just learning always to what is specific to your job function or how to be a dad or a mom, right? Learning is such a broad concept, right? So what I personally like and enjoy and I push, and we do this a lot, Raj, sitting in the audience, we have a book club that we do every week I mentioned earlier where and it's usually some sort of, like we just did the Bill Gates book, right? We all talked about like where could climate change go? We do leadership books and we really talk about some of the hard conversations, right? We have interesting conversations. We hire like world leading experts, both people that we have in-house and external, and we do tons of educational seminars, like, understanding the black soldier fly larvae market. Why is it going where it's going? Which direction is it going, right? And what we find is the more we push the ability for people to want to learn these skill sets within the business and outside the business, that they become incredibly powerful, diverse, like weapons almost.
Yeah.
When they're on they feel so empowered when they're in conversations with our clients or with our colleagues, right? Because they almost go into every conversation having a leg up, right? And there's something about, like they always say, being the smartest person in the room. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I think there's the most good leaders recognize that if you're in the room with a bunch of people who are smarter than you, did the right thing. But it's usually the people that are smart in the room, they don't stop reading.
Yeah.
They're always reading books. They're always learning something new. They're musicians and can't stop fiddling with things. There's just characteristic right there, and I see that really is a common trait. You look at Bill Gates, right? I know he's not having the best of days these days, but he reads a lot, right? He's notorious for his reading in his book clubs. You look at a lot of the leaders these days that are really made it into something significant and from a pathways to success, like just nonstop educating themselves is usually a common theme that I see. And it's something that I'm passionate about, and it's something that our leadership team is passionate about, and we try to push that out to our business constantly.
So what does that look like for you personally? What does your self-education look like?
I read a lot.
Yeah.
My wife and I laugh. My wife is a big romantic novels and
Fiction,
more fiction stuff. I read those and I enjoy them, but
Yeah.
I need to read a business book. I need to read I just finished, for example, I read books called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker.
Okay.
I became terrifyingly expert in understanding the basis of sleep, how to sleep better, why it's so important, how it functions, right? And I literally changed my sleeping patterns, and it's impacted my personal and professional life significantly.
Yeah.
I've read books on how to breathe properly, breathing techniques, and learning why breathing properly is so critical to the human mind and the processing of thought, like stuff I never even recognized. I read Simon Sinek's books on how to be an effective leader and actually understand people's characteristics and not just be so binary in your thinking how you interact, because everybody's so different, comes from a different background. Things like that, right? And just really trying to improve my life and then sharing whatever I learn, right? Whether it's stop drinking coffee at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and informing my colleagues like, hey, you should probably stop drinking coffee at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and here's why. And if you really want to know, read this book and you'll never drink coffee at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
Those types of things reading is a big part of it. I'm also a doer, right? Like DIY. I just hate hiring somebody to do something. My dad gives me crap for this all the time. Like, why are you doing, why don't you just call somebody to do that? I can't. I want to learn how to do it. I can't stand it. And with the birth of YouTube and all these things, right, you can learn stuff on your own if you just want to learn it, right? And so between kind of hands-on projects and tons of reading, and then things like the book club and having great conversations with people like Raj, like subject matter experts, and just having those conversations with the intent of embracing the feedback you get, I would say those are probably the predominant things that I do. What
would you say has been the most impactful book that you have read over the last 3 months that has helped you in your business and career?
It's a great one. 3 months, I would say, I was really a fan, we did a book club of Sapiens. I don't know if you've ever read that book.
Sapiens?
Have you ever read the book
I
Sapiens?
haven't, no.
Raj, help me out. Who's that by again? Yuval Harari.
Okay.
Harari. An absolutely fascinating book on the evolution of the human being as a collective being.
Really?
Really,
Okay.
really fascinating
Sapien,
book.
okay.
He had a follow-up book called Homo Deus, which is like a follow-on of that, and it's more about the future of the human race as it becomes as a collective being. But it really opened my eyes to genuinely understanding why we are the way we are as a collective being. Not as individuals or as like how we've evolved from a DNA perspective, but like as an organism and society. And it really made me realize that a lot of the things I used to get really frustrated, whether it's political or it's, these things that are just so forefront these days, are really just like in perspective or just, minutia relative to like what we've done over 60,000 years. And so it was really interesting to me to kind of, it put me in a place of realizing the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Whereas it's so easy today in today's environment to live in the micro. It kind of took me into a macro world, and it kind of reduced my stress and frustration levels about issues, and kind of realized it's just inconsequential in so many ways. And so I'd say my cortisol levels have dropped tremendously as a result of that.
I'm actually very curious. What is the insight that you internalized that allowed you to separate yourself from everything that you see in the media, the negativity, politics, all that? What is that insight?
I would say it's being able to constantly lock your mind into a big picture mindset, right? Is constantly reinforcing the mentality of where do I fit in this bigger picture, right? Like not day to day or even week to week or even year to year, but like almost like a cosmic perspective of the humans, collective human beings evolution, and being able to recognize that like what somebody says in a political environment that day 10 years from now is probably inconsequential, right? Outside of the the exceptions, obviously there are exceptions, but like just being able to, I constantly reinforce myself that. And that book, and I've actually reread it already multiple times, just constantly helps me reinforce that perspective. I'm also a big fan of just personally like astrophysics and the cosmos. So I read Neil deGrasse Tyson's book recently. And that's another similar category of like the cosmic perspective and just putting things into perspective of where we are, where I am in the big picture and how I think about things. And it's just it's an easy way to feel, I don't know, there's something about feeling small. Right? Feeling small.
I get that.
And having that, knowing you can make an impact, but at the big picture feeling small is almost relieving in a way, because you can reduce the pressure off your shoulders when you realize that you're just part of a bigger collective and you don't have to carry that whole weight. And I don't know, something about that for me just feels good.
No, I totally get it. It's that perspective. And often you experience the world through the self. But when you see things in a bigger picture, you start to get a sense of like how you fit in, and things aren't as bad as you might think they are.
And perspective even of the the fortune that I have in my life, right, versus so many others in the world. Like just keeping everything in perspective is probably the best word to use for your mental state of mind. Is at any given time a reflection of your perspective, right? And so if you could keep a good perspective, and Raj perhaps is one of the best at this in my opinion, is if you can keep a appropriate perspective, then you can really avoid the negative thoughts, you can avoid mental stress to some degree, you can avoid a lot of things. And you couple that with some of the physical things like not drinking coffee at 3 in the afternoon, sleeping better, breathing properly. I do a lot of meditation techniques over the last 6 months, which is new to me, which I'd never done before. And just really balancing the mind is something that I find to be a really fun challenge, but also something that's really changed my life a lot.
I love that.
And all is intertwined.
Ben, I want to close with one last topic that I know you have sort of a personal testimony about. The show is all about the pathways to success. I like to showcase people who've done great things, amazing results that you can validate, because what you have done, the way you live your life, sort of leaves behind a kind of a methodology of how to. But something you are passionate about in terms of achieving success is living a balanced life. What does that mean?
It's kind of, that kind of is like a good wraparound of all this conversation, right? Is, I think everybody in this room and everybody generally knows the workaholic or the not workaholic, right? Or the person who never shows up, or the person who's like just can't live any life but sports, or whatever it is. And I think one of the keys, if not the key, to being the most efficient and best version of yourself is balance, right? You cannot tip the scale physically, mentally, emotionally, socially in any one direction too far, because inherently there's only so much time in a day and only so much thoughts you can process in your brain to allow you to go down one direction too far, and then you're sacrificing the integrity of the other quadrants of those things, right? So if you, if you're a person that gets so caught up in your work and you don't spend enough time with your family or your children or your friends, right? That you're tipping the scale, and there's no way you can be the best version of yourself at work, right? I always say workaholics are some of the worst employees, even if they work 90 hours a week, because you're getting 50% of them, right? I'd rather have 100% of person's skill for 40 hours than 80 hours of somebody at 20% efficiency, et cetera, right? Same thing. If somebody isn't satisfied, like we talked about earlier, if somebody isn't satisfied in their personal career, is not doing what they enjoy doing, right? They're not going to put their all into it, and they're never going to really feel satisfied, because the reality is work is a big part of our lives, but you have to be doing something you enjoy. And I know that's cliche a lot of times, right? Not everybody can do everything you enjoy, but there are nuances within what you do that you can enjoy, and you got to find that and talk to your management team and find those things, right? And be open about it. So I think the way you eat, the way you sleep, the amount of water you drink, I read a book on hydration, all the things that are critical to finding balance, it's not just mental, it's everything, is really, really important to being empathetic and to finding the best version of yourself where you just feel really good all the time, as much as possible.
And if there was just one tip or strategy or action that our audience can take to lead a more well-balanced life, what would you say that is?
Take a break.
Take a break? Yeah.
For me, I now meditate.
Yes.
On a daily basis. That's a big part for me. But take a break. Like whether, how many of us work through lunch or do this or on a phone while picking up the kids from soccer or whatever it is, like focus your efforts on what you're doing and embrace the here and now, even when you're eating. When was the last time, I laughed at my wife said that, was like, when was the last time you tasted your food? Because I'm like working while I'm eating, or I'm on the phone, or like, just actually embrace yourself and embed yourself in the actual thing you're doing. Focus on it, right? Don't be on your phone while eating, while driving, embrace it, and then also just take a break. Give your mind a rest. Whether that's, for me, it's meditation, but it could be go out and shoot hoops at lunch, or go for a walk, for 30 minutes without your phone in your hand. Like whatever it is that you find, but give yourself a break. And that little bit of rest mentally and physically sometimes will be enough to just like reset you throughout your day.
I love that. Ben, close this out. What is your personal definition of success?
That's a good question, actually. We were talking about that pre-show. So for me, my personal definition of success is, it's going to sound cheesy, but it's just finding happiness, being happy with all the balance in your life, right? For me, it's not monetary, it's not non-monetary, it's just balance. If I find myself to be successful if I'm balanced, right? And if on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, I am like truly balanced, where my social life is in great shape, my work life is in great shape, my physical life is in great shape. If I'm like finding that harmonious balance, then for me, that is the definition of having a successful life, not just a successful career.
I love that. Ben, if you would, tell our audience how to connect with you, how to learn more about Nexus PMG, straight into this camera.
Yeah, you can find us on most social media, if not all social media platforms, under the handle Nexus PMG. You'll find me predominantly on LinkedIn, where I write a lot of content and share a lot of my thoughts and our company's thoughts. You can also learn more about the low carbon infrastructure sector through our podcast that Raj Daniels hosts, called Bigger Than Us, THAN. And then you can also check out which you'll probably enjoy if you have children, I know you do, our YouTube animation children's series called Mira and Nexi, where we do like STEAM educational stuff with a sustainability focus for children. And you can find that on YouTube. So we have lots of really great places to kind of connect with me and to connect with our audience, and also connect with me on Clubhouse, where I host a lot of different rooms and we have lots of great conversations.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure to have all that in the show notes as well. We have been making so many references to Raj, and I definitely want to plug Raj Daniels as well, the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Nexus PMG. Raj, you have a book. What is the name of the book? The book is called For You From Me. You can check it out on Amazon. The reason why I'm plugging it is because it is packed with so much of Raj's philosophies that really help you get centered and really truly become the best version of yourself. So we'll make sure to have
I wake up every
more of
morning
that as
to
well.
his newsletter that has a script from his book, and it starts my day off in a good place.
Yeah, no,
Those types of
absolutely.
things make it the little nuances of how you start your day, finish your day, make the world difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Ben, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
for coming on
John.
the
Thanks
show.
for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And everyone else, thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Pathways to Success. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe and hit that bell. And of course, if you'd like to work with me personally and invite me as your next keynote speaker on leadership or personal branding, you can always email me at julian@julianplacino.com. Thank you all, and we'll see you next Thursday.